My father said my Queens apartment and hospital job would embarrass the family at my sister's wedding. 3 months later, the groom's mother called at 9:15 p.m. begging for help. At 5:30 a.m., I walked into that waiting room and changed everything my father thought he knew about me. My father was cutting his pot roast when he told me I would embarrass the family. Not with anger, not with cruelty exactly, or not the kind that announces itself, that gives you something to push back against. With the particular matter-of-fact quality of a man delivering weather. It's going to rain Thursday. You'd be out of place. The specific flatness of someone who has assessed a situation and is simply reporting his conclusions, and who finds your reaction to those conclusions more surprising than the conclusions themselves. I was at the far end of the table. This is a detail I want you to hold. I was at the far end of the table. 23 family members in my parents' Westchester dining room on a Sunday in March, and I was at the end nearest the kitchen, beside my cousin Danny, who is 16 and primarily interested in his phone, and my sister Sarah was at my father's right hand, her 3-carat diamond catching every light in the chandelier with the specific efficiency of a stone that has been selected to catch light in chandeliers. Senator Thornton would be at the wedding. My father had announced this 15 times since the engagement. He announced it again, to the table, with the satisfaction of a man who has acquired something he has always believed should belong to him. Then he turned to me. "Emily," he said, "this wedding is extremely important. The Thorntons are sophisticated, influential, people who matter." "I know," I said. "You'd be out of place," he said. He said it the way you say it's cold today. Just information. You're still renting that tiny apartment in Queens. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. You work at, what is it, some hospital job. "I'm a doctor," I said quietly. He waved his hand, the wave of a man dismissing something small, not a successful one, not like Dr. Patterson's son. "He has his own practice in Manhattan, Park Avenue, does very well. You're just getting by. I don't want you coming and making Sarah feel embarrassed in front of the Thorntons." My mother laughed. The specific nervous laugh she produces when my father has said something that makes her uncomfortable, and she has decided that laughing is less dangerous than objecting. My sister Sarah, who is 31, who is beautiful, who has my mother's cheekbones and my father's absolute confidence in the correctness of her own perspective, did not look at me. She was studying the centerpiece, an arrangement of white roses that my mother had done herself. "When they asked about you," she said to the centerpiece, "I didn't really know what to say. I mean, what do you even do, exactly?" Something went very still inside me. The stillness was not new. I had been practicing it for 31 years, the specific internal quiet of someone who has decided, somewhere early in childhood, that the most dignified response to certain environments is to simply not fill them with yourself, to be present and contained and to wait. I had been waiting a long time. "I'm a pediatric cardiac surgeon," I said, "at Mount Sinai." My mother laughed again, nervous. "Don't exaggerate, Emily. I'm the chief of pediatric cardiac surgery," I said, louder now, because I had been quiet for long enough and the table was going to hear this. "I've performed over 2,400 successful surgeries. I'm published in the New England Journal of Medicine. I lecture at Columbia. I make $847,000 a year." Dead silence. The kind of silence that isn't quiet at all. The kind that contains 23 people simultaneously processing a rearrangement of something they believed they understood. My father stared at me. I reached into my bag and slid my hospital ID across the table, the card with my photograph and my title and the Mount Sinai logo that is, in certain rooms in this city, one of the most recognizable symbols in medicine. He looked at it. He pushed it back. "This doesn't change anything," he said. "You spent years making us think you were nobody. What kind of person does that?" I picked up the ID. I put it in my bag. "The kind," I said, "who wanted to see if her family loved her for who she was, not what she accomplished." I walked out at 4:23 p.m. Let me tell you how a person becomes invisible to their own family, because this story doesn't make sense without that. My name is Emily Chen. I am 34 years old. I grew up in this same Westchester house, at this same table, in the specific atmosphere of a family organized around the performance of success. Not success itself, but its visible indicators, its social proof, its capacity to be announced at dinner tables and confirmed by the names of other successful people who had chosen to be adjacent to it. My father, Richard Chen, is a commercial real estate developer who has spent 35 years building the kind of wealth that Westchester country clubs recognize, and that he considers the primary language of merit. He is not a cruel man in the simple sense. He is a man who has organized his entire understanding of value around a single system and who genuinely cannot perceive things that exist outside that system. Success is visible, social, announced. A Park Avenue practice, a senator's son, a 3-carat diamond in a chandelier. My mother, Helen, has spent those same 35 years translating my father's world into social warmth. The nervous laugh is not malice. It is the specific smoothing mechanism of a woman who has been managing a difficult environment for decades and who has gotten very good at it. My sister Sarah is the one who is always visible to them. Easily, naturally, in the way of someone whose specific gifts happen to align with the system the family uses to measure things. She is charming and beautiful, and she chose, at 31, to marry Marcus Thornton, whose father is a United States Senator, which in our family is an achievement of the first order. I was always harder for them to see, not because I was less accomplished. That is not the kind of sentence I allow myself to say, because it edges into the self-pity I have been avoiding my entire adult life, but because the kind of work I do is invisible in the specific way that surgery is invisible. It happens in rooms rooms most people will never see, on bodies most people would rather not think about, and it produces outcomes that are felt rather than announced. I started hiding it deliberately when I was 26, not all at once, gradually in the way that decisions accumulate rather than arrive. I had been at Mount Sinai for 2 years at that point, in my surgical residency, and I had come home for a dinner that was almost exactly like the March dinner I have just described. The same table, the same arrangement, the same dynamic in which the question, "How are things going?" was directed primarily at Sarah and arrived at me as an afterthought, and in which my answer about the work I was doing was received with the slightly glazed attention of someone being polite about a subject they find uninteresting. I started a surgical fellowship. I didn't tell them. I completed the fellowship, published my first paper. I didn't tell them. I was appointed attending physician at Mount Sinai. I didn't tell them. I drove the same Honda I had driven in residency. I kept the apartment in Queens, smaller than I needed, farther from the hospital than was ideal, but mine, which was the point. I had money I was not spending, not because I was ascetic, but because I was conducting an experiment. The experiment was simple. Would my family love me if they didn't know? I had 31 years of evidence about what they thought of me when they believed I was ordinary. I wanted to know if the ordinary version of me was someone they would choose. By March, I had the answer. I want to tell you about the 3 months after I walked out, because those months are where the story lives between the dinner and the phone call. I declined every call, deleted every voicemail, blocked the numbers that called repeatedly, my mother's landline, my Aunt Patricia's cell, the family group chat I had been marginally participating in for years, where my sister's wedding preparations had been arriving in a steady stream of photographs and opinions. I worked. That is not a sad sentence. I want to be precise about that. I worked in the way that I have always worked, which is to say with the specific absorption of someone for whom the work is not a coping mechanism, but a genuine vocation, who operates on children's hearts not because she has nothing else, but because operating on children's hearts is the right use of the specific person she is. In those 3 months, I performed 47 surgeries. I mentored 2 residents who were in the specific difficult stage of learning where you know enough to understand how much you don't know. I published a follow-up paper on coronary anatomy anomalies in pediatric transposition cases. I attended 2 international conferences. I did not think about my family very often. I want to say this honestly because the dramatic version of this story would have me aching for them, and the truth is more complicated. I had thought about them for 34 years, and I needed 3 months of not thinking about them. The wedding was June 8th. I worked a double shift, 2 surgeries, a 5-year-old with a congenital pulmonic stenosis that had been mismanaged at a community hospital, and a 9-month-old whose VSD had grown large enough to require intervention that could no longer wait. Both went well. Both children were in recovery by 7:30. I drove home, ate dinner standing at my kitchen counter, showered. My phone rang at 9:15 p.m. Unknown number. Dr. Chen. The voice was controlled in the specific way of someone who is performing control very hard because the alternative is not performing it at all. This is Catherine Thornton, Senator Thornton's wife, Marcus's mother. I sat down on the edge of my bed. My grandson Charlie collapsed during the rehearsal dinner, she said. He's 3 years old. He was running on the terrace and he collapsed. Greenwich Hospital stabilized him, but they can't handle the surgery. They said, her voice fractured, just slightly, just enough. They said you're the best in the tri-state area for this kind of case. They said your name, Dr. Emily Chen, Mount Sinai, pediatric cardiac surgery. They said to find you. I asked for the clinical information, vitals, EKG findings, what the Greenwich team had determined. She gave me what she had. I asked specific questions. She relayed the answers from the physician on the phone with her at Greenwich. Transposition of the great arteries, ventricular septal defect, abnormal coronary anatomy. Exactly my specialty. Not generally my specialty. Specifically, precisely the constellation of defects that I have spent 8 years developing and refining a surgical approach to, that I have published on, that I have been invited to speak about at conferences in 3 countries. Have Charlie transported to Mount Sinai immediately, I said. Tell the transport team to call ahead for my team. They'll know what to prepare. I'll be there in 45 minutes. You'll come? Her voice broke fully then. I'll be there, I said. I called my surgical team from the car. By the time I arrived at the hospital, the OR was being prepped, and my resident Dr. James Okafor, 4 years with me, one of the best surgical minds I have encountered in a generation of training them, was already reviewing the imaging that Greenwich had transmitted. Charlie arrived at 10:38 p.m. I scrubbed in at 11:12, 6 hours. I want to tell you what 6 hours of pediatric cardiac surgery actually is, not because I need you to be impressed. I am not writing this story to be impressive, I am writing it to be accurate, but because I think the invisible work deserves to be described once, clearly, so that when my father sat at a table on a terrace in June and watched 50 people raise their glasses to me, you understand what they were raising them to. A 3-year-old's heart is approximately the size of a walnut. It beats somewhere between 70 and 110 times per minute. In transposition of the great arteries, the aorta and pulmonary artery are connected to the wrong ventricles, which means the oxygen-depleted blood and oxygen-rich blood circulate in separate loops rather than mixing, which means the body is not receiving the oxygen it needs, which means the child will not survive without intervention. Add a ventricular septal defect, a hole in the wall between the ventricles, and abnormal coronary anatomy, which means the arteries supplying blood to the heart muscle itself are in the wrong positions and must be carefully reimplanted during the correction, and you have the specific constellation population that has made this surgery one of the most demanding in all of pediatric cardiac surgery. I have performed it 211 times. I have lost 3 patients in 8 years. I think about those 3 every day. I think about them the way surgeons think about the cases that didn't go as they should have, not with guilt that dissolves, but with the specific attention of someone who is committed to understanding what happened so that the next time is better. Charlie was 212. James was across from me, steady in the way that residents become steady when they have been trained well and have learned that steadiness is a form of respect for the patient. The perfusionist managed the bypass circuit with the quiet precision of someone who has done this hundreds of times and understands that her job is to keep the field clear. The anesthesiologist, Dr. Sarah Park, 14 years at Mount Sinai, the person I would choose if I were the patient, maintained Charlie's status through the procedure with the specific focused calm that is the difference between good anesthesia and great anesthesia. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. At 5:24 a.m., Charlie Thornton's heart was beating on its own in the right configuration, the great arteries corrected, the septal defect closed, the coronary anatomy reimplanted in positions that would allow his heart to receive the blood it needed for the rest of a life that was now going to be considerably longer than it would have been 12 hours earlier. I stepped back from the table. I stood there for a moment. This is the part that is not in any paper I have published, not in any lecture I have given, not in any interview I have done. The specific private moment after a surgery like this, when you step back from a child who is going to live and you are alone inside it for a second before the room comes back. Then the room comes back. Nice work, James said. You too, I said. Close up. I walked into the waiting room at 5:30 a.m. Catherine Thornton saw me first. She was on her feet before I finished crossing the room with the specific quality of someone who has been sitting for 6 hours in a state of suspension and whose body has been waiting for permission to move. I said, he's going to be fine. Catherine Thornton is 63 years old and has, by all accounts, spent those years managing rooms that are very difficult to manage. She is the wife of a United States senator. She has been through campaigns, controversies, public scrutiny of the specific relentless kind that political life produces. She is, by reputation and by every impression I had formed from 6 hours of a crisis in which she had been consistently composed, not a woman who falls apart easily. She fell apart. Completely, genuinely, without performance. The tears of someone who has been holding something enormous for 6 hours and has been given permission to set it down. She held my hands and she cried and she said thank you more times than I counted. Senator James Thornton, whose face I recognized from years of seeing it on news programs, a man of 71 who has the specific bearing of someone who has commanded Senate chambers and committee rooms and press conferences, looked in that waiting room at 5:30 in the morning like a man who has just been shown the edge of something he was not ready to see. He shook my hand. He held it for a moment longer than handshakes usually last. Thank you, Dr. Chen, he said. Charlie's father, Jonathan, 33, Marcus's brother, who had spent the night against the wall with his knees pulled up and his face in his hands in the posture of someone who has temporarily exited his adult life and retreated to something younger and more afraid, was not composed at all, and I did not require him to be. I stayed for 30 minutes. I answered questions. I explained what Charlie's recovery would look like, what the follow-up schedule would be, what to watch for, what was normal. Catherine said, as I was preparing to leave, please come to the wedding. I was going to say no. I had a script for no, politely, appreciatively, genuinely touched, but I have a full schedule and the family doesn't need more disruption, and it was truly an honor to help. Something tired of hiding said yes. The wedding was a brunch reception at the Thornton estate in Greenwich. I arrived in a navy dress that I had bought 3 years ago for a conference dinner and had not worn since. A valet took my 10-year-old Honda without comment. I walked up a path lined with hydrangeas that someone had spent considerable money on, and I thought, I have slept 4 hours and saved a child, and my father is somewhere in this garden. I saw my mother first. She was at a table on the terrace with my father and my Aunt Patricia and 2 of my cousins, and she saw me from approximately 40 feet away with the expression of a woman who has been convinced she would not see me today and has just been proven wrong. Her mouth opened. I was looking at her when Catherine Thornton appeared at my elbow. Emily. She had the specific quality of someone who has decided that the most important thing she can do today, at her son's wedding, is this. Come with me. I want to introduce you. The terrace held approximately 50 people. The wedding was intimate by Thornton standards, which meant that the 50 people were the ones who mattered most. Catherine moved through them with the ease of someone in her native environment. She stopped at the center of the terrace. She turned to the assembled guests with the quality of someone making an announcement she has been looking forward to. Everyone, she said, I want to introduce Dr. Emily Chen. Last night, while we were at the rehearsal dinner, our grandson Charlie collapsed. Dr. Chen drove to Mount Sinai at 9:30 in the evening and spent 6 hours performing emergency surgery on a child she had never met. The terrace went very quiet. He's going to be fine, Catherine said, because of her. The applause started before she finished the sentence. Not polite applause, the real kind. The kind that comes from 50 people who have heard something true and are responding to the truth of it. Senator Thornton raised his glass. To Dr. Chen. To Dr. Chen, 50 voices said. I stood in the middle of a Greenwich terrace at a wedding I had been told 3 months ago I was not suitable to attend, and I let the applause happen around me. me, and I looked at my father. He was 2 tables away. He had gone from pale to crimson, not the crimson of anger, the crimson of a man whose face is doing something involuntary, something that is happening to him rather than being performed by him, the specific color of someone confronting something they have no prepared response to. Catherine guided me toward the head table, toward my parents. She placed me in the seat beside my father's table, the kind of proximity that wasn't accidental, that was the specific choice of a woman who had spent the previous 3 months hearing that the Thornton wedding would be attended by people who mattered. Marcus Thornton, the groom, 34, with his father's bearing and his mother's warmth, looked between me and Sarah with the expression of someone assembling a picture he had not been given the pieces to before. "Your sister is Dr. Emily Chen," he said to Sarah. "The Dr. Emily Chen? My father has been trying to get a meeting with her for 6 months. She's advised on healthcare policy. She's testified before the Senate Health Committee. She's completely changed how pediatric cardiac surgery is practiced." Sarah said, "I didn't know. How could you not know your own sister is—" "I didn't know," Sarah said again, quieter. "I'm not famous," I said, quietly, because it was true. "I'm just good at my job." Marcus nodded. He had the specific look of someone who has understood something that reorganizes other things. My father sat 2 seats away. He did not speak. Not during brunch, not during the toasts, not during the 90 minutes I sat at that terrace with the Thorntons, while 50 people who had been told I mattered by one of the most prominent families in the Northeast treated me as someone who mattered. He never spoke. He didn't need to. I had spent 34 years trying to understand the silence my father had always used with me, the silence that I had always interpreted as dismissal, as I see you and you are not enough. I had built a career, in some partial way, against that silence, driven by it, shaped by it, determined to become something so undeniable that the silence would eventually have to break. The silence on that terrace was different. It was the silence of a man who had said you'd be out of place and had been shown, in the most public and specific and irreversible way available, that the place he had imagined did not have the boundaries he had drawn. It was not triumph watching him. I want to be precise about that. It was not the satisfaction of a moment I had planned. I had not planned any of this. I had gone to that dinner table in March and been told I would embarrass my family, and I had walked out and worked for 3 months and answered a phone call and operated for 6 hours and come to a wedding because something tired of hiding had said yes. The look on his face said everything his 30 years of silence never had. Not pride. I am not writing a story where my father's recognition is the point, because that is not the point. What the look said was something simpler and more irreversible than pride. I was wrong. He never said it. I did not need him to say it. The evidence was on the terrace. 6 months later, Charlie Thornton had his 6-month follow-up in December. He walked into the clinic holding his mother's hand, which he was doing more reliably than he had been doing in October when he had decided that walking independently was more interesting than holding hands, a development his parents described as simultaneously alarming and entirely age-appropriate. He was 3.5 years old, and his heart was working as a 3.5-year-old heart should work. We spent 20 minutes together. He showed me a drawing he had done, which he described as a car, but which also contained what appeared to be a dog and possibly a house. I told him it was excellent. He seemed satisfied. His parents asked if I wanted to get coffee. I said I had a surgery in an hour. They walked me to the elevator. His mother said before the doors closed, "Is there anything we can do for you? Anything at all?" I thought about the question. "You already did it," I said. "You called me at 9:15. My sister Sarah called me in October, 2 weeks after the wedding. She called from a number I didn't recognize, which told me she understood I might not pick up a call she recognized. I picked up. She was quiet for a moment. "I didn't know," she said. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I genuinely didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said. "How could I not know?" She said it like a question to herself rather than to me. "I'm your sister. How did I not know?" I thought about this honestly. "Because I didn't tell you," I said. "And because you didn't ask. Both things are true." She was quiet. "Are we?" She stopped. "Is there a version of this where we're okay?" I sat with that question. "I think so," I said. "But it starts from here, not from before. We have been finding our way from here slowly, in the specific cautious way of people who are not sure of the terrain but have decided to keep walking. My father has not called. I did not expect him to, and I am at peace with not expecting it. There is a version of this story that ends with his call, his apology, his revision of everything he thought he knew about me. That story would be satisfying in the way of stories that resolve completely. This story resolves differently. It resolves in a December clinic, with a 3-year-old showing me a drawing of a car that might be a dog, in a terrace in Greenwich where 50 people raised a glass, in the specific private moment after the surgery, stepping back from the table when the room goes quiet for a second before it comes back. I drive the same Honda. I kept the apartment in Queens, bigger now, a 2-bedroom I moved into in September, because I had been living in a size that was a statement rather than a preference, and the statement had served its purpose. I am not hiding anymore, not because I no longer need to, not because the people I was hiding from have changed, because something tired of hiding said yes in the lobby of a Greenwich wedding, and that yes changed the terms. I am the chief of pediatric cardiac surgery at Mount Sinai. I operate on children's hearts. My father told me I would be out of place. He forgot that place is made by what you do inside it, not by what you drive to get there.